Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Jennifer van der Kleut. Nee McBride is an award-winning former journalist of both print and digital publications, including the DC affiliate of ABC 7 News. A graduate of San Jose State University, she spent most of her life in the San Francisco Bay Area before moving to the Northern Virginia suburbs of DC, where she currently lives with her husband and two sons. For nearly a decade, she was the lead singer of the Bay Area band base Sweet Duration and performed with artists like Jason Mraz, Big Country, Chantal Crevice, and Stabbing Westward. When she's not writing, she loves going to the beach with her family, going to concerts with her girlfriends, and getting lost in the pages of a book. So, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, it seems like you're doing a lot of creative stuff here. So, what pulled you towards writing? Was it the storytelling, journalism aspect that like how did this happen?
Yeah, I've always loved storytelling. As a kid, my father was very big in musical theater, so I grew up around, performing and writing and stories my whole life. And just from a very young age, I always had a book in my hand, always reading. As I grew up a little, I tried to think of a way I could turn it into, a career, a profession. So I think that's what drew me to journalism. So I did that for many years and I really liked it. But I left the journalism industry in 2014, and my father said, Now you need to try writing a novel." And I kind of pushed him away for many years, saying, like, no, that's silly. I need to get my career on track. And only about a couple of years ago, I finally said, you know what, I am gonna try. I needed something creative to get my juices flowing again, and I just immediately fell in love with it and thought, gosh, I shouldn't have waited so long to try this. And things just happened from there. So definitely got my love of reading and storytelling from my father, and I'm just absolutely loving this new chapter of my life.
Now, how did working as a journalist, did it help shape the way you started writing your fiction?
It did. I'm not sure in a good way or a bad way. They're so absolutely different. One is just concrete facts, keep emotion out of it,
Mm.
and the other is, the complete opposite. It did teach me to get to the root of what people will be interested in. So I think that really helped when I started writing, as far as having a strong beginning, hooking the reader right away, because you definitely have to do that when you're writing a news article. If you don't get them by the first paragraph, they're just going to scroll to the next thing. So it definitely helped me with that. Um, yeah, everything else is kind of the complete opposite. Definitely two very different hats.
Now, what kind of journalism did you do?
I mostly did features, back when, newsrooms had the budget to have somebody for hard news and somebody for interesting features. I was always the features person. I loved interviewing people. I loved doing profiles. I loved covering community events like concerts and plays, all the things I grew up around. After a while, then, as newsroom staffs got smaller and smaller, it was one person does everything. So I was given an entire town to cover anything and everything that happened. So it was the town hall meetings, the school board meetings, the police, crime, and features on top of all of that. So I definitely got to wear all the hats at once. One other thing I guess I did learn a lot was self-editing. Um, a lot of times, especially in the digital news industry, you're in such a hurry to get the story up so that you can be the first one to break the news, that you have to learn to just kind of skim over it, self-edit very quickly. You don't always have time to run it by another editor first before you have to post it. So I definitely learned a lot about that.
Okay, now you have a new book called The Better Mother. So what sparked the idea for this book that made you want to explore toxic female relationships?
Well, I've always been a thriller lover, a mystery lover. Growing up, Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie, always my favorites. Trying to guess the clues and figure things out. This story in particular, it actually was inspired by a Reddit post that I saw.
Oh,
Sometimes I love to read the Am I the Asshole thread,
oh,
if you've heard of
okay.
that. It's a guilty pleasure. I always say nothing is crazier than real life.
Hmm.
You can try to make up the most bizarre thing you can think of, but there's probably a real story out there that could even beat that. So I was reading and I came upon this post one day from a woman who was asking for advice. She said, I had a short fling with this guy and I just found out I'm pregnant. I got in touch with him to tell him, but I found out that in the time since we stopped seeing each other, he got together with his ex and married her. So now I'm not only trying to co-parent with him, but she's in the picture. And it's already an awkward, messy, tense situation. But then the woman started to become very overbearing and calling herself the mother, saying that, she had to have an equal say in all the decisions and saying, you need to eat better, you need to exercise more, maybe I should come to your doctor's appointments, things like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like such a crazy situation. And I was like, that would make an amazing book. So I kind of took that premise and just ran with it. Um, we never really got to find out what happened with
Yeah, I mean,
those
on
people.
Reddit,
If
yeah.
yeah, they
They
did
ended up
one
kind of
follow
following
up.
up. Yeah, exactly. The follow-up's
Yeah,
not very good
she
on
did
Reddit.
one follow up where like people were saying, get a lawyer, and she was trying to do that, and never really found out how it ended up. But I wanted to kind of make it my own anyway, so I kind
Yeah.
of made my own
Okay.
ending.
Now, can you give us sort of like a back cover synopsis for those that haven't seen the book?
Absolutely. So it's about main character Savannah Mitchell. She's 34. Just like in the Reddit post, she just got out of a long relationship where she thought she was going to, be with him forever and have children, and then he kind of changed his mind about wanting to get serious, and they broke up. So for about a year, her life just kind of completely falls apart. She's really devastated. When she finally gets her life back together and decides she's ready to put herself out there again, she meets someone at a bar and they just have a very casual fling, see each other a few times, and then they kind of fizzle out and lose touch. And then a month later, she finds out she's pregnant. So she gets back in touch with him to tell him. And in the time since they stopped seeing each other, he's gotten back together with his ex-girlfriend that he kind of talked about a few times when they were together. But she just wants to form a friendly co-parenting relationship. She's like, this is fine. You can be with her. We don't have to be a couple. I just want us to give this child a good life. And then Madison, the girlfriend, she starts to become very overbearing. She starts referring to it as our baby, and I'm the stepmother, and wanting to go to her doctor's appointments, kind of taking control, everything she eats, exercises, and even, starts to plan a baby shower for herself and try to pick out names and things like that. So things get very dicey, and it's more than just a tense co-parenting relationship. It becomes really obvious that she has some very dark, sinister plans for the baby and all of that. And it gets very harrowing at the end.
Okay, now the novel has a lot of different themes, right? Like you speak about control and motherhood and boundaries. And so, what kind of questions do you want the readers to think about when they're reading your book?
Um, well, it's interesting. In some of the early reviews that I've been getting, some people say, wow, the main character Savannah really frustrated me because she just let them push her around for so long and didn't stand up for herself. So I guess that was a very interesting theme for me because, it's something we all experience with family. It's at some point you just want to keep the peace because you're all family and you're going to be together forever. And so maybe you don't always say the things that you're thinking. Maybe you don't always call people out when they're mean to you because you're just trying to keep the peace. And so in the beginning, that's what Savannah's doing. She's saying, no matter what, I want my baby to have its father in its life. So if it means I have to get along with this girl who's kind of annoying and overbearing, I'm going to do that to keep the peace. And but then eventually it reaches a point where she's like, this is going too far. Now I need to stand up for myself and for my child. So that's an interesting theme. So I'm always interested to hear what would you do in that situation with readers? Like, at what point would you have said this is enough, or would you have let it go even farther than she did? Um, so yeah, that's one of my favorite things to hear. Like, what do you think you would do in that situation? Everybody thinks they know what they would do, but once you're actually plucked into that situation, you might react differently than you expected.
Okay. Now, usually it's a thriller, and is
Mhm.
it a murder mystery or is it just a thriller? Like, what's the difference between these genres? I'm not that familiar, sorry.
Yeah, sometimes they're the same. Sometimes thrillers involve a murder and figuring out who did it. There's no murder in this one per se. So it's not a murder mystery. It's definitely more of a psychological thriller where it's about mind games, gaslighting, stalking, that sort of thing. Yeah, t taking control, feeling like you're entitled to something. Our villain, Madison, the father's girlfriend, she's very wealthy, and a lot of times people think that, just because I have so much money, that means I can have whatever I want. I can buy it. Everything has a price. I'm entitled to it. I'm better than you. Um, and some of the themes are mothers comparing themselves to other mothers. Like, am I a good mother? What makes me a good mother? If I feed my child all organic food, does that mean I'm a good mother versus the one who just buys jars of baby food from the grocery store? Savannah goes through kind of an identity crisis about that, comparing herself. Madison says she would be the better mother. Savannah says, I'm the actual mother. I would be the better mother. Um, that type of thing. So yeah, not a murder mystery in this one.
Okay, cool. Now, was it challenging to keep the tension going in the book? Like, did you find any challenges when writing the book?
Definitely. I've always been a very long-winded writer. I write way too much, and like the first draft of this book was over 120,000 words. And everyone I talked to was like, yeah, you really need to get it down to 80,000 to 90,000 if you want it to have any sort of commercial appeal to a publisher. So that's my challenge in everything.
Hmm.
I'm too long-winded. I really love getting into character backstories and motivations. So I kind of just, my first draft, I just let everything flow,
Yeah.
everything out. And the challenge is always later going back and cutting things, especially with a thriller. The pacing is so important. Getting a lot of the filler out of there. I tried not to have too many down moments, but yet also balancing with having enough interior thoughts to let you get to know Savannah. So that's a very tough balance, and I think that is the case for any thriller writer
Okay.
versus, upmarket fiction is more, you can have all of that in there and it doesn't need as much action, but a thriller definitely does.
So, how did you, okay, you finished your manuscript and then how did you find a publisher?
Well, I went to a couple workshops. One of them helped me with the outlining of the novel, having all the necessary elements like the inciting incident, the climax, kind of the false ending where you think everything's okay, and then another crazy thing happens, all of that. It was called the Algonquian Writers Retreat here in the States. And they helped me with that outlining and identifying all the key elements. And then I went to another workshop where they teach you how to write a query letter and, how to boil down your story into two paragraphs, which is hard for a long-winded writer like
Yeah,
me.
that's true.
And how to say just enough to hook someone, but not too much to give it away, especially with a story like mine. it seems like a pretty straightforward story. It's like you said, it's not a murder mystery. We know from the very beginning who the protagonist is, who the villain is, and kind of which direction the story is going in. So the challenge was, how can I throw a twist in there, a wrench, something that will surprise people because it is kind of a straightforward story. But once I kind of got that query letter together, I did it just like anyone else. I downloaded Query Tracker. I tried to research agents that represented thrillers and had openings, and I just started sending out queries, and I was lucky to get a handful of requests to read the full manuscript. And then the agent I ended up going with, she was the first one to offer representation, and it just worked out because she's a thriller writer herself. So I loved that she has been on both ends of it. She deals with editors and publishers, but then she's also a writer who has to send her work out into the world and try to get takers. So yeah, it was very, very straightforward, very vanilla story. Sent out queries, got a response, and was very lucky in that regard.
Okay. I mean, you in the bio it mentions you have a pretty busy family life with two kids. So what does your writing process look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, this is another reason why it's funny when I say like, oh, why didn't I try this sooner? I love this, and it feels so right, so natural to me to be doing this. Um, my kids are teenagers now, so they don't need as
They don't care
much
anymore. Yeah.
parent time. You're right. They come home from school, they shut themselves in their rooms and play their video games and text with their friends. So I feel like in a lot of ways, everything happens for a reason. If I had tried doing this earlier in my life, I probably would have bombed. I probably would have got frustrated and given up, not having enough time, trying to do it while also balancing younger kids and a job and all of that. So I feel like it happened at just the right time for me where I'm in a place that, um, my kids, they've got plenty of stuff to do on their own and their friends and their social lives and school. And I have a good amount of time to focus on the writing now.
Okay. Now, what advice would you give to new writers who want to break into thrillers? Like, do you have any good advice?
Yeah, for me, I've always been a huge thriller writer. It's always been my favorite genre. I do love other genres. I love romance. I love historical fiction. I try to broaden my horizons and read a little bit of everything, but definitely the majority of everything I read is a thriller or a mystery. And I think that's the best thing you can do. You can just immerse yourself in your chosen genre. Read all the thrillers you can, read all the big ones that are successful, read some, lesser known ones that are doing something a little bit different. But the more you immerse yourself in that, the more you're going to see all the different styles, what readers seem to respond to. So that's always number one tip. And and the next is just to solicit a lot of feedback on your work. And it's kind of a controversial topic in a way in the writing industry, as far as, paying for beta readers or being in writers groups and having critique partners. And I think all of that is super important. But if you're really serious about wanting to get a traditional publishing deal, I think getting professional feedback is the best thing that you can do. And to just get a lot of objective feedback. You can show your writing to your friends and your family, but are they really going to be honest with you? Um, you know,
No.
um, when you deal with a professional, it's like not only do they not care about your feelings, they'll be very blunt and honest with you, but also they have that background to really speak to. Like my first um, The Better Mother is the first novel that I finished completely. Before that, I started writing a very different book. I always say it was kind of a mashup between like an Ellen Hildebrand, women's fiction, slight amount of romance in there with the White Lotus. It was at a resort, all these different women, it's a certain point in their lives and they all come to the resort and they're all staying there at the same time dealing with a problem in their life, and then something scary happens at the resort. So it was like I was trying to mash two different genres together, and I had five main characters, five points of view. It was just too much. And I took it to that workshop and they said, this is too much. They're like, first of all, with a debut, they're like, you can't have 5 points of view in a debut. I mean, you could, but very small chance that that would go anywhere. They're like, your best chance as an unknown author is to, have something very straightforward, a protagonist, a villain, 1 to 2 points of view at most, and kind of stick to your genre, not try to have it be 3 genres and 5 points of view and all of that stuff in there. And so who knows how many years I would have wasted, trying to go with that book. And being long-winded as I am, it probably would have ended up being like 500,000 words. They're like with 5 points of view and 5 different character arcs, they're like you're writing 5 books and trying to smush them into one book. And I was like, oh, you're so right, because that's the trick when you have multiple points of view is that, each one has to have their own character arc. You have to have, the whole, those little curve. You have to have the whole arc. So, it was a wake up call. It was like, okay, I need to do something a little more straightforward. Don't be so ambitious. They're like, once you have a few novels under your belt, if you really want to try something with 5 points of view at that point, you'll probably be more experienced and you can kind of get away with doing something that's a little different. Um, so that feedback is really important. And then the first draft of The Better Mother that I wrote was very different than what's coming out as, the finished product. I had two of the characters end up in a romance together. I had, way too many chapters of downtime and over analyzing thoughts and everything. And they said, that you've got a great protagonist, you've got a great villain, but you don't have a twist. And twist is the one ubiquitous thing every thriller has to have, especially nowadays with what's popular. So they helped me figure out a way that I could at least try to surprise the reader a little bit. I didn't have to change who my protagonist was or who my villain was, but I needed it to not be so predictable and
Mhm.
have something that kind of throws you for a loop. So they helped me identify that and put that into the novel. And so all that professional feedback was just so important.
No, like just briefly about twists. Like, can you have too many? Like, I just finished a drama. I know it's a totally different thing on Netflix called The Vendetta of On. And it was about like the
Mm.
northern tribe attacking the southern tribe. And secretly, the northern tribe had infiltrated the southern tribe. And then slowly you find out each character, like the main character, has a lot of teachers. And then each teacher turns out to be secretly from the north. And you're like, oh, come on. Like, I know it was supposed to be a twist, but I think after the
Yeah.
third guy was also from the north, you're like, come on. If everyone's from the north, why do they bother attacking the south? Because they're the same people anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think there probably can be sometimes too many. I think that's also the difference between like a feature length movie and a series. If you need to stretch it out and get 6 to 8 episodes out of it, you're probably going to throw more twists in there than if it's just a straightforward hour and a half, 2 hour movie. Maybe you only need one. And similar with books, like if it's going to be a series, you can't put everything into the first book. You've got to save some things and have some twists to happen and surprises for the other books in the series. Whereas a standalone, it's kind of like you've got one book, you got to put it all in there. And if you don't want it to be 200,000 words, then maybe one twist is enough.
Jennifer, you're doing a bit of a reading for us. Can you give us some context before you start?
Yeah, I'm gonna read chapter 3, and that is right when our main character, Savannah, is about to meet the father of her child, Max, and his new girlfriend for the first time. So, she got back in touch and told him about the baby. He said, I just got back together with my girlfriend, Madison, but she wants to meet you, to try to get all the awkwardness out of the way and try to form this friendly co-parenting relationship. So Savannah is super nervous and she's about to meet Madison for the first time. So they're meeting at a coffee shop.
All right, cool.
It was barely 9:15 when I walked into the coffee shop Sunday. I'd gotten there early on purpose. My strategy was to be the first to arrive. Then I'd get to watch them as they walked in, like they were the ones on display rather than me. I ordered a decaf latte and sat down. As I waited, competing thoughts in my head talked over each other. Max says she wants to help. Isn't that a good thing? Who cares what she thinks of you anyway? You don't want to be with Max, and you don't need to be her friend. So just meet her and get it over with and be on your way. I didn't have to wait long. A couple of minutes later, an attractive couple entered the coffee bean. I took a deep breath and steeled myself for whatever was about to happen. First came Max, holding the door open for his girlfriend. Whoa, I'd never seen him so dressed up. He wore a pair of pressed khakis, dark brown dress shoes, a blue and white checkered button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to just below his elbows, and a navy blue tie. His hair was slightly wet and combed flat and neat, and he wore a pair of stylish aviator sunglasses. And what looked like a brand new, very expensive silver watch gleamed on his wrist, catching the sun. His girlfriend sashayed in past him. She appeared charming and put together, dressed in a bright floral sundress and a white cardigan. Her chocolate brown hair hung in curly waves down past her shoulders, held back with a thin headband. Was that a diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist? And a Birkin bag on her arm? She looked up at him with an adoring smile as the door closed behind them. Jesus, could she look any more the part of a Stepford wife? I looked down at my yoga pants, hoodie, and sneakers and brushed a lock of unwashed hair that had escaped my ponytail out of my eyes, swallowing a bit of regret. Ugh, this isn't a competition, I reminded myself. It doesn't matter what they think of you. Hi, Savannah. Max smiled as they approached me. He took off his sunglasses and slid them into the breast pocket of his shirt. I stood up awkwardly and gave as bright a smile as I could muster. Hi. Madison's arm was linked with Max's. Her face was frozen in a smile. Savannah, this is Madison. Hi, Savannah, she said with a cheerful force. I felt my mind go blank as her perfectly straight, gleaming white teeth distracted me. I blinked. It's nice to meet you. I gestured behind me at my table. Do you guys want to join me here? Or you probably want to get some coffee first, right? Madison turned to Max. Sweetie, why don't you get us a couple of coffees? Sure, sweetheart. Savannah, can I get you anything? I held up my drink. I'm good, thanks. Max got in line to order. The line was even longer than before as the place filled with more Sunday morning patrons. Madison and I both watched him for a beat. Then our eyes came together. Let's sit, shall we? She said, and took the seat across from me at the table. I felt like I was about to give a job interview. This is so weird. We were both silent for a moment, staring at each other. Is she going to speak first? Or should I? What do I say? Then suddenly, Madison let out a giant laugh. Sorry, she said, covering her mouth. It's just, this is so weird, right? I laughed too, some of the tension in my shoulders loosening. Yeah, yeah, it is. I can't imagine what you must have been thinking coming here today. Like, why does this girl want to meet me? I let out another nervous laugh. To be honest, yeah. Well, please don't be nervous. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's just, this is a crazy situation for all three of us. And I just wanted to meet you and tell you that you have nothing to worry about. I took a deep breath, feeling myself relax a tiny bit more. Well, so far so good. She seems nice enough. I know this pregnancy isn't something either of you expected or wanted, she continued. My cheeks colored. I made a non-committal murmur. Madison leaned forward and grabbed my hand, squeezing my fingers. So, do you want to be a mother, Savannah? I mean, I can't imagine how you must be feeling after such a huge surprise. I bit my lip, smiling sheepishly. Yeah, it was definitely a shock, and I'm nervous for sure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to being a mother. I surprised myself as I realized for the first time that was actually true. I was looking forward to meeting my child. For a second, Madison almost looked surprised, like that wasn't the answer she expected. Really? She said, tilting her head. Wow, I mean, that's so admirable. If I were you, young, carefree, I'd be pretty bummed to leave this single life behind and be tied down to a world of pumping breast milk and changing dirty diapers. I nodded with what I hoped was a brave smile. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be difficult, but I think I'm up to the challenge. Madison pursed her lips in a polite smile, then leaned forward to grab my hand again. Well, don't you worry, Savannah. Max and I are here to help. Everything is going to be just fine. We're happy to take care of the baby for you. My instinct was to smile and thank her until I realized the way she'd phrased it. Take care of the baby for me? Oh, stop being paranoid. She's offering to help, so you don't have to do it all alone. Remember, it could be so much worse, I told myself. I opened my mouth to say something, but Max was just arriving with 2 coffees. How are we doing, ladies? Oh, we're just getting to know each other. Madison smiled sweetly as he handed her one of the drinks. She took a sip, then her face pinched into a frown. Ugh, sweetie. Is this skim milk? It doesn't taste like skim milk. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Max looked chagrined. Do you want me to go get you a new coffee? She pursed her lips. No, it's fine, she said, patting the chair next to her and gesturing for him to sit. She turned back to me. So, have you picked out an obstetrician? Yes, my regular gynecologist, Dr. Quinlan, at the Women's Care Clinic downtown. I've been seeing her since I first moved to the city. Lovely. And when is the baby's due date? The doctor estimates November 8th. Madison clapped her hands like an excited child. Oh, how wonderful! The baby will be here for the holidays. I smiled in wonder as I absorbed this new fact. Wow, by Thanksgiving, I'll have a baby. Yeah. Again, Madison leaned forward and took my hand tightly in hers. Why did she keep insisting on touching me? It was so unnerving. We'd just barely met 15 minutes before. So, how have you been feeling? She asked. All right. I've been tired and I felt a little queasy for the first time yesterday, but it hasn't been too bad. I can't complain so far. Well, I'm glad to hear that. She paused, withdrawing her hand and looking me up and down. And just look at you. You're so pretty. I can just tell you're going to be one of those lucky pregnant women who just glows and stays tiny all over, everywhere except for your cute little basketball belly. My cheeks flushed. I gave a short laugh, feeling the weight of her eyes on my body. I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. I glanced at Max, but he was looking down at his hands, fidgeting with the clasp on his watch. I don't know about that, I said. We'll see, I guess, but it's nice of you to say. And after the baby comes, I'm sure you'll bounce right back, and I bet you meet someone very special in no time, she continued. Well, that is, unless, are you seeing anyone now? Max's head popped back up at that question. My eyes darted back and forth between them. Feeling awkward and exposed, I reached up to tighten my ponytail. Uh, not currently, no. It may have been my imagination, but I thought I heard Max slowly let out a breath at my response. Madison turned to look at him. An adoring smile spread across her face. I just know Max is going to be a wonderful father. He smiled back at her, then leaned in and gave her a slow, tender kiss. I averted my eyes and rooted around in my purse for my phone. Hey, listen, I'm sorry to cut this short, but I do need to be getting on the road. I stood up. Oh, of course, Madison said. She and Max both stood up. Max says you're off to visit your mother today? Where does she live? About an hour outside the city. Oh, really? Where? Pleasanton in the East Bay. Oh, that's nice. Well, it was lovely to meet you, Savannah. We have to get going too. My mother is coming into the city to meet us for brunch. My parents live in Sausalito. Sausalito is one of the most beautiful and wealthy communities on the Northern California coastline. That explains the tennis bracelet and the Birkin bag, I guess. Well, I hope you have a great time. Max reached out and put a hand on my arm. Thanks for coming, Savannah. We really appreciate it. As I made a move to walk away, Madison grabbed my arm tight, startling me. Her face held the same wide, frozen smile it had when she'd first entered the coffee shop. I'd really like us to be friends, Savannah. I hope we can be. Wow, she's eager. I smiled back politely. Thanks, Madison. I put my sunglasses on and opened the coffee shop door. Bye now. The end.
Well, thank you very much for your reading, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Helix Press. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.